everyone. My name is Kirk Bachman, and welcome back to The Ultimate Dish. Today, we're honored to have Hosea Rosenberg, award-winning chef, culinary entrepreneur, and owner of two celebrated Boulder restaurants, Blackbelly and Santo. Renowned for his commitment to local, seasonal ingredients and sustainable sourcing, Hosea's culinary journey began while studying engineering physics at the University of Colorado. Go Buffs. What started out as a job to pay for school quickly became a lifelong passion. After training with legendary chefs such as Wolfgang Puck, Kevin Taylor, and Dave Query, Hosea rose to national fame as the winner of Top Chef Season 5. He went on to found Blackbelly, first a catering business and food truck, now a full-service restaurant, butcher shop, and market known for house-made charcuterie and ethical sourcing. In 2017, Hosea launched Santo, a tribute to the northern New Mexican cuisine of his childhood in Taos. In 2024, he opened Blackbelly Market Denver, a deli-forward outpost focused on meat curing and daytime fare. His accolades include Michelin Green Star for sustainability, Michelin recommended status for both restaurants, and recognition as best chef at the Denver International Wine Festival. He's also been honored as a guest chef at the James Beard House 2022 Hero of the Year by Conscience Alliance, an outstanding philanthropist by the Colorado Restaurant Association. The U.S. Small Business Administration has recognized him as a leader who inspires entrepreneurs nationwide. So get ready. Get ready for a powerful conversation about integrity in cooking, honoring your roots, and turning passion into purpose. And there he is. How are you, Chef?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on today.
Absolutely. There's a lot there. We're going to just try to dive in and get through it all. First, I have to ask about the backdrop. Is that virtual or is that real? Is that at the restaurant?
This is real. I'll give you a little. This is our wallpaper in our private dining room. It goes way up.
I
So I'm
love that.
in
I
a
love
private
that.
space here in the restaurant, trying to find something quiet where I can talk to you.
Because
Yeah.
there's usually noise everywhere. There he is. There he is.
Yeah,
There's
well, I was
Chef.
just in the kitchen, and you would not be able to hear anything if I was trying to talk to you there.
Can I just tell you, before we kick off, as a Boulder local, for at least the last 15 years, it means so much to have, someone like you, your team, your family, Blackbelly Santo as part of the community, your presence, your philanthropy, your popularity. I remember eating at Jack's when you were, probably a teenager, running that show, having the time of my life. So, I just wanted to say thank you. I've been hoping to get you on the show for a very, very long time, and here we are. And I may not let you go. So, thanks, thanks so much. So, what's going on today? You're at the restaurant. Just to set the tone for our listeners.
Sure. Yeah. Sort of a typical day for me. As you mentioned, I've got a number of irons in the fire. We're also a couple weeks away from opening Santo at the airport at DIA.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on there. And then we actually have another project in the works that my wife will kill me if I bleed too much of this, but we are going to be doing another project here in Boulder soon. So
Oh, I love it.
hitting you and your students up for an army of helpers when that day comes.
And yeah, I double checked that. We're so blessed and so fortunate that you've been able to provide experiences for our students over the years. And I was telling you earlier how much my family, my wife Gretchen is probably more excited about this. Every other week it's like, well, when are you going to have Jose on the show? Well, I thought you were a big shot. When are you going to have Jose on the show? So she'll be super, super pumped. But I have to, I threw the little love out there for the Buffs, but your story is anything but ordinary, Chef, right? You went to University of Colorado. Tell us about engineering physics. Like, what is that?
Well, I've always been good at math. I've always liked math, one of the odd ones, I guess. And I didn't exactly know what I wanted to do when I grew up back when I was a teenager. And thank you for saying that, but I'm 51 now, so I'm far from but back when I was in school, I wasn't really sure what to do. I was very interested in astrophysics, astronomy, that kind of stuff. So I was going to school and I had a really cool experience to see you, loved going there. I worked in restaurants the whole time I was in school because I needed money, and it was something you could do at night, weekends, and still do well in your classes. Always loved restaurants. I made a lot of lifelong friends during those years, but I was thinking that my purpose was science and engineering, and I had a job that was funded by NASA. I had a NASA grant to study solar flares up at NOAA, and I was
Wow.
doing what I
Wow.
thought I wanted to do, but I was bored to tears, and I was in front of a computer all day, just kind of filling out spreadsheets, and it just wasn't fulfilling me. And I kept thinking about the restaurants and kitchens and cooking, and I was thinking that I actually needed to go to culinary school. And ironically, I'm talking to you today about this, but one of my mentors, I was, trying to pick his brain and figure out what I should do. And he was like, you owe all this money for college. You have student loans you've got to pay back. You've been cooking for years now. What you really should be doing is applying what you've learned and work under someone really good and find someone that will teach you. And that's what I did. So I always say this because I've done some guest teaching at your school, and I deal with students all the time, and I always tell everybody that I would never tell you not to go to school. It's just you have to look at where your life is at that moment. And for me at that time, it was time to just work, and I learned on the job, and I bought all the cookbooks I could afford, and I invested in a few knives and a couple aprons, and I just went to work every day, and I would go home and study all the things that I saw happening in that kitchen. And I'm a fast learner, and I was really, really motivated to make this work. And so I worked for a number of people over the years and just try to absorb it all as I went. And, you put your head down and you work really hard. A lot of times that's kind of the American dream, right? You work at something and then you'll be rewarded later in life for it. And so it's worked out really well for me. Got a number of businesses. I'm married with a child and own my home, and things. I grew up very poor, and I didn't have any money, and that's one of the reasons I worked the whole time. And it feels really good that cooking and food and hospitality has allowed me to create a life that I'm very happy with, and I'm very proud of all the things that have happened so far.
And you should be. I thank you for being so humble and so transparent. And you've said before that cooking started as a means to pay for school, and you said it today again, but it became that passion, that pursuit. Was there that one moment where you just knew, I'm going to walk away from NASA, I'm going to walk away from, studying science, and this is it. This is what I'm doing.
Well, there've been a couple of those moments in my life, but at those early days when I had been cooking for a while, and I'd worked in a number of different restaurants, and it wasn't so much the food, it was the people. It was the fact that I wasn't really making friends in this sort of, quote unquote, real job that I had. And I wasn't really that connected with those people. And everybody I worked with in restaurants, I just really adored. And we had so much fun together. And I felt like it was my people, and I wanted to kind of be around the people, spend those days working with people I actually want to be around. And this isn't a slight on scientists or anything like that. It just, for me, I needed to be doing something with my hands. I needed to be standing up, doing more physical work. And one of the things I love so much about cooking is that there is a lot of science involved and a lot of math, and especially as an owner, I'm looking at spreadsheets as much as I'm looking at recipes. But on the other hand, you get to exercise that creative freedom. And so to me, it's the left and the right brain combined. And if you can apply the science and the regimen and the being very pragmatic, but also get to work with farmers and learn about new vegetables and get really creative when it comes to flavors. To me, that's just the perfect combination.
And none of that is scripted, as I say to my audience. The combination of talking about food and farmers and numbers is so important, right? We say
Absolutely.
it over and over and over and over
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
I was up saying hi to Eric Skokin last night, and it's like 90 degrees, and I'm like sweating, and he's just got a big smile on his face as always, and getting ready for the next day. They butchered nine hogs last night, so it was really, really busy. I have to ask, years ago, when my family moved to Colorado from Chicago, we moved to the Gunnison Crested Butte area originally. So I had a restaurant there with my dad for a while. And I just remember any chance I had to drive to Denver to go to a Kevin Taylor restaurant. And there were a handful of them. What was that like working for that group? I don't know where that has all landed, but there was a time when any restaurant that you went to was a Kevin Taylor restaurant.
Yeah, no, I was sort of part of that during the heyday. So one of my jobs when I was still in college was at Dandelion, which is obviously not around anymore, but
Yeah.
down on, Walnut and 10th, I guess, ninth. Um, it was a really, really amazing restaurant. And it was one of the places that I worked at the time that made me realize that you can make a career out of being a chef and a restaurateur. It's not just something as a stepping stone that can actually be the destination. I really loved that restaurant. It was the first place I'd worked at that the menu was always changing and they were being incredibly creative and involving, ingredients and techniques from all over the world. So I worked at Dandelion when I was in college, and then I left. I actually took a road trip with one of my best friends at the time, and we were gone for months. We were kind of traveling around the country, and that's when I made the decision that I wasn't going to go back to that old work and I was going to become a chef. And, that's when I was trying to figure out how to do that. And if I should go to school, if I should just work. And I ended up coming back to the area, and I ended up moving to Denver for a while, worked for Wolfgang Puck, opening one of his restaurants. But then I left to go work for Kevin Taylor. He was opening up restaurant Kevin Taylor, which was his flagship restaurant.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I figured, at the time he was the number one guy, the number one name in Denver. And if I was going to stay here, I should work at the best restaurant from the best chef. And that was the most formative years of my career. I think I had the biggest growth curve. I learned a ridiculous amount. I got to be exposed to fine dining, like really high-end fine dining. But it was also one of the hardest periods of my life. It was excruciatingly long hours. I was working 6 days a week. I'd be there from 10 to 12 hours a day. And that went on for a couple of years. And it was tough because he didn't pay us very well. I couldn't afford a car. I had a bike, and then my bike got stolen. I just had to take the bus because all I could afford was rent and food. But in my mind, it was okay. Like, I wasn't bitter about it. I wanted to learn, and I figured I was learning so much every day, and I was learning how to butcher and make sauce and bakery stuff and culinary arts. Like, all of it was all in that kitchen. In addition to learning a little bit about service in front of the house and wine and the whole lot. So I felt like I was in a school, getting paid just enough to survive. I was cooking real food for real people, and that really made me happy.
That's incredible. Where does Dave come in? What was he with Big Red F at that time when you worked with him?
Dave Query, yeah.
Yeah.
So I worked for Kevin for a few years, and then I left to work at another spot here in town that isn't around anymore. And at the time, I was dating a girl that worked for the Big Red F. And the restaurant I had moved to wasn't doing very well. They were already kind of going under when I joined up. And she sort of helped facilitate this meeting with Dave. And he was in expansion mode. This was back, oh man, like mid 90s. No. It was early 2000s. I'd worked for Kevin at Restaurant Kevin Taylor during the millennium. And I remember that, like when it turned to your 2000.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was like 2001, 2002, somewhere around that time. And he had just bought the West End Tavern. And so the chef of Jack's moved over to the West End, and I jumped in as head chef of Jack's. And I ended up working for Dave for 5 years. And that was a really incredible time. And like I mentioned, when I worked for Kevin, I learned a lot of the mechanics of being a chef, like how to run a kitchen, how to order food, how to butcher meats, how to understand food costs, that sort of thing. But what I learned from Dave was how to run a very successful business. And the most important part of it all is keeping your staff, keeping them happy, keeping them bought in. He likes to talk about drinking the Kool-Aid. When I worked for Kevin, it was very militant. And I think I needed that at the time to really get my head straight when it came to how hard this is and how much work goes into it. But with Dave, it's like, there's a vibe in his restaurants, and people are happy to work there and they're happy to eat there. And I came into this team that was very welcoming to me. The managers, the other staff, the cooks, everybody was just so awesome. And I'm friends with, in fact, when I'm done with this, I'm going home and I got to cook pizza for my friends, Rachel and John, who I worked with when I started at Jack's. So
isn't that something?
It's been over 20 years. So made a lot of great friends, and I learned so much about how to treat other people and how to grow a business. And, since then he's opened like 10 more restaurants, and I really admire how he's done it, because a lot of people in his company have been around for decades at this point. And that to me is the key to success.
I can remember dining at Jack's while you were there. I was there with a friend from Portland, Oregon, who came to visit. And what always amazed me the few times I was there is that it was kind of crowded, right? There was people around the kind of that horseshoe bar, and then people up and down the walls, right? And there was just so much happiness in that dining room. It's kind of loud. There was all kinds of seafood. People were like sharing stuff, across tables, and lots of deuces, right, set up. And yeah, really, really, really,
They had a disco ball over the bar.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Michael Jackson, and the whole room was dancing,
Yeah, everybody wanted to be a part of it. So what did those formative years, super important, for young people to hear, teach you? You've touched on it a little bit about, leadership and creativity, but even just the I'm going to use the word grind of professional cooking. It's easy for us to sit here and kind of talk about how successful you've been and all the positives, but what people don't feel or see, and I always say this to thought leaders like yourself, man, they didn't experience those 12-hour days, and you said 6 days, but there were probably more 7 days a week than 6 days a week, when people call off and stuff. So I'm just from a mindset, what did all of that teach you about professional cooking?
Well, nothing comes easy, I think, was the main lesson. It's so hard to learn all of this. There's so much involved in cooking and running restaurants. And a lot of times people forget that it's the restaurant business. And,
yes.
just because a restaurant's full and popular does not mean it's actually making any money. And, a lot of people understand that owning a business is hard, and owning restaurants is incredibly hard. And most restaurants don't make it. The majority of them fail within the first 2 years. And it's because what we do is we walk a tightrope every day. And so if you don't, like, my philosophy has always been, if I'm going to be your boss, if I'm going to be the chef or now the owner, I need to understand everybody's job that works for me. So as the chef, I made it my mission to not only know this for myself, but that the staff would know that I can wash dishes as well as any dishwasher that works in our restaurant, probably faster than them. I can work every station in the kitchen. I know how to make every recipe. I know how to mop the floors, and I know how to clean the drains if they get clogged. And I do all those things on a fairly regular basis. I did more so when I was, just a chef, and now I'm an operator. I've got other bigger fish to fry, so to speak, but I can still do all those things, and I have no problem doing those things. I guess the lesson is that if you're looking to get rich, or if you're trying to be famous, this isn't the job. You're not gonna. Most chefs, most culinary professionals, you can get by and you can make a living for yourself, and at the very minimum, there's food at your fingertips. You can always feed yourself if you're in the kitchen. But this isn't for the fame, and it's not for the money. And, I was fortunate enough. I got very lucky to get picked for Top Chef, and it did change my career trajectory in my life. But I always like to tell people, especially during that period, right after the show, I was getting a lot of, appearances on TV, and I was getting paid to travel and go to places, and a lot of autographs and pictures with folks. And my thing was, nobody wanted my autograph when I was washing dishes, and I had to do that and work hard at that and all these other things before I got this opportunity to get on television and do this work. And most successful chefs out there will tell you that there was years and decades that went by of the grind of working your tail off for very little money and no real, like, celebrity stat, whatever, no attention. And then, if you do it long enough and work hard enough, then hopefully one day someone will notice, and then you get a bigger opportunity. We use a lot of sports analogies in our kitchens because, it's all about teamwork and it's all about a collective goal. And there's a lot of professional sports people out there, baseball players, football players, tennis players that work their tail off for years. Musicians do the same thing. I was reading an article about Nate Bargatze this morning, who's a world famous, comedian, but he grinded it out for 25 years, just scraping by until finally he had his chance, and
I love him, by the way. I love him.
Great. Well, he's like the most popular comedian in the world right now, but he wasn't 5 years ago. Nobody knew his name. And so that's, to me, it's just, you gotta find some love in what you do, because everything else, is going to be hard for a while, and you better really enjoy the work.
I have to go off script for a bit because you said music, and we've done about 150 shows over the last 4 or 5 years, and more thought leaders, more chefs, more restaurateurs than not have a love for motorcycles, music, cooking, or all of the above. Is music part of your jam?
Yeah, absolutely. I've always played music. I used to play piano when I was a kid. In fact, we're getting I can't do it for my daughter because she won't listen to what I say, but one of our bartenders here at the restaurant is a very good musician. And so he comes to our house once a week and teaches her piano. And
no way. That's great.
Yeah, it's really fun. I've always loved music. I can play guitar and piano, and I always have something on. I go to a lot of shows. I don't play as much as I used to, but I do love it. And I think there's a lot of similarities. You have to spend a lot of time working on your craft, learning the fundamentals, learning the theory, and learning different instruments and how to play them. And then maybe one day you'll get really good at it. But even if you're not, it's still fun to do. It's just like cooking. You may not cook for a lot of people, but if you enjoy it, then you're a chef.
Have you seen the Led Zeppelin documentary?
No, but it's on my list.
It's so good. Yeah, it's so good. So behind me, I have these tiny little albums, Dave Matthews, U2, Fleetwood Mac, always, and then I've got, you recognize him over there, right?
You're kind of cut off. I don't have you on speaker.
Marco Pierre White. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Hanging on the wall. Yeah. Motorcycles too, or no? Fast cars?
No, my wife will not allow it.
It's a good reason. Good
Once
enough.
you get married, you have to kind of, make some sacrifices, and that's one of them. She wants me to stay alive. So
that's a smart one. Yeah. I have one in the garage, and my wife unfortunately saw the insurance bill the other day, and she's like, "Why are you still insuring this thing?" I imagine when you were engaged in the idea of engineering and studying space and science, there's probably a lot of problem solving in that field, right? And solution seeking. Did that background influence or have some impact on the way you run a kitchen in addition to what you learned from
absolutely
Kevin?
Yeah. I have this whole fleet of young chefs here at Blackbelly in particular that are they see this as a great restaurant, a place to kind of earn their stripes. And one of my comments to them always is the cooking is the easy part. All this other stuff that you have to deal with. And so I consider myself a problem solver more than probably anything else anymore. So for instance, when we go do catering events, and that's how I started Blackbelly, we'll go to a field and have to set up in the middle of nowhere with no water, no electricity, no services. You have to think on your feet and really get creative, but be practical. And so pragmatism is a big part of what I do. I always have lists and timelines, and I try to stay organized and make sure everybody's kind of following along. That, here at the restaurant, we have very hard timelines for things. We change our menu basically daily, at least some of the meat cuts and whatnot. So we've got this big dry erase board in the kitchen, and that's got to be filled out by 2 sharp. You got to have all your stuff there. And if you're planning on running a special, it needs to be up there in writing. And if it's 2:05 and it's not up there, then it's not happening tonight. And so we stick to these really strong timelines because that keeps everybody on, kind of rowing in the same direction. Because other things are going to come up. The power might go out, or a fridge stops working, or somebody doesn't show up. And if you don't have everything else in line and working smoothly, the curveball that inevitably comes every day, like I mentioned, it was raining a second ago and I'm just waiting for the roof leak, and you got to be ready to deal with that stuff too. And so for me, I think I'm actually becoming more of a, kind of a handyman around here than I am. I can fix most things. I know where everything came from. I know who to call when something breaks, or, the two things I never mess with are gas and electricity. I'll call the experts in for that. If a table leg breaks, I'll, get the glue out or whatever, but, drill. But I'm not messing with something that'll kill me.
Gas and electricity is tough for me too. I'll set up an oven. I'll go up on the roof. I'll do all that. But yeah, there's a limit. It's interesting. You're kind of talking a little bit about mise en place too, just kind of a, common term in the kitchen. My father is a, master pastry chef from the German standards, came over in the 60s. And when we were working together in the restaurant, it was the same thing. He would challenge me on things like, what are you going to do if the gas does go out? And it happened. What are you going to do if the ice machine breaks down? And it happened. The only time that he really got upset with me is, we were big on making our own stock, right? And so we would buy the bones and cook them down, and they'd be in an Alto-Shaam for hours. And then every once in a while, I was young, right? And so I'd throw some base in there, and it just threw him through the roof. Why did we just pay $1.25 for these special bones and cook them when you're going to throw base in there? But he's right. Respect the craft of cooking, think ahead. I just, many of us met you, Chef. I want to kind of connect all this when you first won Top Chef, right? Season 5. So, 16 seasons ago, right? It was a long time ago. And I imagine, like you mentioned, that experience, that kind of new show, really catapulted your career in a very public way, even before social media was like as crazy as it is now. I'm curious how that experience in your mind challenged you even more to become the chef that you became, because you're like under the spotlight, right?
Yeah, that was a crazy experience top to bottom. So I had I'd done a couple local cooking competitions here, little things, and been on TV a couple times, like the local news station promoting some festival part of or whatever. So I'd had a little dabble in those sort of things, but I'd never done anything like this. And I had thrown my name in the ring, and nothing happened. And a very good friend of mine, Melissa, who at the time was working just down the street at what was then called Rumba, now it's Centro, and I was at Jack's, and we both applied, and she got picked, and she was picking out her clothes and some new knives and getting all ready to go on this show. And I was admittedly pretty jealous, and I'm also an incredibly competitive person, and I couldn't help but say to myself, like, I'm better than her. I would beat her. Like, how did they pick her? And a week before she flew out, they called me and said, hey, congratulations, you're on the show. And so it turned out later, I found out that I was an alternate and somebody couldn't make it for whatever reason. And so they only gave me like 6 or 7 days to get all my affairs in order. I just found out that my dad had cancer. I just got the news like the day before. I had a job. It was like, how on earth can I go with this short of notice? I called my dad, and he's like, look, I'm sick, but I'll be around in 6 weeks. You don't have to worry about that. And I checked with Dave, and this is, another big props to my old boss, Dave Query. He supported it. He allowed me to do this. And I, frankly, I couldn't afford to do this unless I was getting paid. So he actually, kept me on payroll while I was doing the show, because I think he knew it would be good for the restaurant too, as long as I had a decent show, right? So I did it, and I really had no clue what I was getting myself into. I didn't understand the magnitude or the breadth of this show. I didn't realize how many Millions of people watched it. I hadn't even really seen the show. I just knew it was some cool competition that they were, letting people apply for. And so I flew out and I was totally oblivious to how this whole thing was going to shake out. And it may have worked in my favor because some of the chefs I met had been, like just practicing and, pretending, thinking about all the things they're going to say on TV and picking out their clothes and whatever. And I just sort of grabbed my stuff and went. And I was naive and I definitely felt a little out of my element. Some of these chefs had been working in really big cities. We were filming in New York, a few New York chefs there that had worked for some of the best chefs in the world. And I was coming out of Boulder, Colorado, working for people that no one had ever heard of, and so I didn't know how I was going to stack up, but I'm smart and I'm a problem solver. And that's how I sort of approached it, like a problem, not who's the best chef, but who can understand this challenge and work it to your advantage. I'm also a poker player. I have been for a long, long time. And I think of it as a little bit of a poker game. You kind of, you see what cards you have, and then you got to play the other people. You're in competition with these other chefs, and you're also in competition with yourself. And the clock is a huge part of this challenge. And a lot of great chefs that I've seen go on the show just can't handle the time challenge, and all of a sudden you may have the best dish in the world, but if you don't get it all on the plate when the buzzer goes, that's it, and so it's a mental challenge. You got to stay cool and collected. And I feel like I did a decent job with all that.
Yeah, that's such great advice. You've said in the past, and it probably resonated, through your performance on the show. You've said, I love to feed people. I love hospitality and I love delicious food. That's never going to change. What does that quote mean to you today, Chef, after winning Top Chef and everything that you've built over the years?
Well, I mean, it rings true still. I mean, I still love all of it. I love the fact that we are a part of other people's stories, that we have folks come in here. We've had people get engaged in this restaurant. We get hired to cook for weddings, for birthdays, for big celebrations. In fact, we were catering at a private residence last night for sort of a kickoff for Sundance, and now we're part of these stories that people will remember. And it's this human touch, right? If you're having a wonderful wedding that all your family and friends come to and the food's delicious, it just makes that story so much better. And then we become just a little part of their story. And that to me is just so touching. And it feels like it matters. Like what we do really does matter, even though food is so fleeting. It's gone, you eat it and it's gone. It's not like music where you record an album like Led Zeppelin and it's going to be around forever. What we do is just poof, it's so fleeting, but everyone eats and everyone gathers for food. And some of the best memories in your life happen around the table. And that's why I chose this line of work, because we can really be a part of these wonderful moments in people's lives and make it better.
Yeah, so well said. The memories is a great word, emotion. Curtis Duffy's been on the show a couple of times. We've done a lot of things with him over the years. And the one time, and I'll ask you this question later, but the big question is, what is the ultimate dish? And he was really sincere and very emotional about a memory, and that memory is being able to sit around the table with his family, because chefs are busy.
Yeah.
And they're often not home at night, right? Because that's when people come to see them. So really, really well said. Let's talk about Boulder. Let's talk about Blackbelly. Began as a food truck and a catering company.
Yeah. So, you asked me earlier about the moments, right? And so there was
Yeah.
another moment after Top Chef. I was, really having a wonderful time because I was able to travel and do all these food festivals and meet all these, I met every famous chef there is in those 2 years after the show, going to Aspen Food and Wine, all these wonderful places. So I was bumping around, and I had connected with some Boulder local people. We started this food truck, which I thought was a really cool idea. Food trucks were all the rage back then. And we ran into a lot of snags because there were a lot of ordinances that we didn't really consider when we started it out, and we couldn't be near restaurants. We couldn't be near other food trucks, and you had to get these permits to cook anywhere. And it was really cool what we were doing. And it was really fun to be an entrepreneur and start something. But I didn't feel like that was what I was going to keep doing for much longer. And and it's the point of my story. I went to Sonoma to this heirloom tomato festival. And it was like a 3 or 4 day event in Sonoma, just 150 varieties of tomatoes, and everybody's cooking tomato dishes. It's really fun. And a bunch of the chefs were staying at this big, beautiful house. And at the end of the weekend, when the show was over, they cooked for us. They wanted to celebrate all the chefs that were there. So we had a party at this big house we were staying at. And they hired this husband and wife team that had a farm and a catering operation. And they were cooking in our kitchen, and they were making, it all came down to this bowl of beans. Really, it was pork and beans, right? And it was sausage from the pigs that they had raised. And it was these heirloom beans that they had grown. And they had this bottle of hot sauce. It was house fermented hot sauce. They were just doing everything off their land. And that light bulb went off. And I was like, man, I can do this. I can do something like this. So I wasn't really sure if I wanted to open a restaurant or keep trying out food trucks, or, try to get back on TV and just turn that into my thing. But I don't actually love being on television. I don't think I'm, maybe I'm not pretty enough. I don't know what it is. My wife tells me I wave my hands around too much when I talk. So something like
it's
that.
It's probably why you're good at it, right? Because you approach it from a place of humility and sincerity, right? Yeah.
But I realize that, like, to me, when we talk about Colorado and we talk about what our food identity is, it's the farms, it's the ranches, it's the meat, the livestock that we grow here. We have a very, very short, growing season when it comes to produce, but we have amazing produce. People like Eric at Black Hat are just growing just amazing stuff. So I decided that I wanted to do something kind of centered around these things that are growing here, and here like a time and place, something that represents Colorado. And I partnered up with a friend of mine who had a bunch of land in Longmont. We started raising some animals, and this whole thing just sort of happened organically. We started raising pigs and sheep, and I started my own little catering company. And that's where the word Blackbelly came from. It's a breed of sheep that we were raising. And I think that Colorado lamb is the best lamb in the world. So why not, name it after something that means something great to a lot of us. And about a year into doing the catering, I kept growing. I had to move out of one commissary to another, and I was doing some consulting as well at a couple places. I helped some friends kind of start their businesses up. And I found this location where I'm at, which is sort of in a weird spot in Boulder. It's East Boulder, in an industrial area, not many restaurants, not a ton of businesses out here, but this space was perfect for a catering operation. Big kitchen, lots of parking, good access to, getting to Denver, right by the highway. And it was just going to be the catering outfit. But then, as we were talking to the landlord and trying to figure out what to do with the space, like, well, maybe we do want to put like a little cafe in here or something. And then it's like, well, if we're going to do daytime, we might as well have some dinner, and might as well have a bar. And then it all sort of grew into this grand restaurant. And over the years we grew. When we moved in, it was the restaurant, and we were still doing catering out of the space. And we wanted to have an emphasis on butchery. So we had our own little butchery operation, but it was all sort of in the same kitchen. It was very tight, very small. And we quickly were, outgrowing it. There was a donut shop next door, which is the space that I'm sitting in now. And they went out of business. So we moved into the old donut shop and built a proper butcher shop here. Well, a few years later, which was, I guess, 2 years ago now, the Quiznos, which was in the wall, located in the wall behind me. There's 3 units in this building. We now have all 3. Quiznos moved out, and we moved the butcher shop and market over there. It's like 3 times the size that it used to be. This space that I'm in now is a private dining room. We also have a dedicated prep kitchen for the catering crew, because they've always worked out of the restaurant kitchen in the past. And so now everybody has their own space, and we have lots of different rooms and 3 patios. And it's over the course of 12 years, 10 as a restaurant, but 2 more as catering. It started off as just me and a vision and a couple people that would work part-time for me. And I had this little trailer that I towed around to multiple businesses, 100 employees, lots and lots of sales and things going on all the time.
Well, we like the location because I'm just a little further east in Lafayette, so we can get there.
Perfect.
We were there, it's probably a month ago now, maybe a little longer, a time before, and we just got really lucky. We had three grads that were in the kitchen that night, and I don't want to get
Oh,
anybody
cool.
in trouble, but they sent a lot of food out that night,
Oh, that's
and
fun.
we had a great time.
As long
I
as they
want to talk.
oh, fun.
I got to talk about the sustainability practices that you've built. You've been recognized for them. I know they're really important to you. They matter. And so you've built that into your daily operations. My question is around how how do you train your staff to be aligned with those practices and your vision?
Well, so yeah, that's such a core part of what we do here. So even when we were catering, I wanted to set myself apart and only do events where people actually cared about the food. We weren't just there to fill up chafing dishes and move on. We wanted to do events for people that wanted to have food that was amazing. And by amazing, I mean have a story behind it. So not just delicious, but local and fresh. And so over the years, I have made sure that everyone that works in this kitchen understands that we're working with very, very fresh ingredients, very expensive ingredients, very special ingredients. And everything that goes on the plate has a story and it has a reason to be there. And we're trying to be really, truly in the season. And the best way to know what's in season is go down the street to the farm and find out what they're pulling out of the ground. We have
Absolutely. Yeah.
this wonderful meat. So we've become very close with like Clint Buckner and we call him Big Daddy at McDonald Family Farms, who brings us all his pork, and then the guys that bring our beef. And so we have these people bringing us fresh animals that we're breaking down, and that's also a big part of our philosophy. We're not telling people to eat a lot of meat. You should eat meat where you know where it came from, where you can actually talk to the people who raise these animals, how they were treated. And we bring in one animal at a time. So the cuts change every day. And we get through that animal, we go to the next animal. And then to make it good, we have to have, more than just a piece of meat on the plate. So we work with all these wonderful local farms, and we've had quite a few connections with different farmers over the years. A lot of them are the same people that we were buying from when we opened the doors. And to me, if I can tell you, yeah, these carrots came from Mark at Esoterra, and this lamb came from Clint at Buckner, and there's, a sauce made from the bones, and there's, some fresh herbs from our herb garden right out the back door. That's a plate that tells you a story of the time and place you are. And if you take a picture of that, you can say, okay, that was June 17th in Boulder, Colorado, and they had these carrots and this lamb, and it was all from a couple miles away from the restaurant. And that has always been our kind of core belief that anybody that comes in here should when they eat the food on the menu, everything that they're getting tells you where you are and what time of year it is.
Yeah, so well said. And it's such a good lesson for students to understand that, we've got the farm to table class where, we're out there talking to the farmer. I don't know if you're familiar with, I loved your comment about the seasonality. Farmer Lee Jones, the Chef's Garden in Ohio,
Yeah.
is really connected with a lot of great restaurants around the country. But his favorite question in the world is when a chef calls him up and says, "What should I put on the menu?" And it's all dependent on what season it is, right?
Right.
It's easy,
Yeah.
easy question. I want to talk a little bit. I'm intrigued by Santo. I can remember the first time my wife and I went. It's a busy, plaza, I'll call it, right? Always has been there in North Boulder, right? And we sat at the bar and we met some people to the left, and my wife talks a lot. And we met some people to the right, and the drinks were great, and the bartender was amazing. I can't remember if it was that time when we come in with the family, we would have this one portion. I can't remember. I think it was duck, and it was like steamed, or I don't know what it was, but literally falling off the bone, right?
Mhm.
And what I loved about that, and again, I know listen, it's great food, it's great vibe, and it means something to our family. But to sit there and have this beautiful dish where all four of us are just like, was that the idea that this is a little a little sort of neighborhood spot where you can eat with your hands, you can have a great drink, and everybody's smiling. I've taken the team from here. We've sat outside. We've sat inside. We like sitting at the bar. That's when my wife and I come alone, right? Um, but I'm just curious, and I love the idea that you just don't hear, a love letter to your hometown of Taos. I love Taos, New Mexico, by the way. What inspired you to bring that cuisine, that authentic cuisine with an open kitchen, right? Right there to Boulder. Did you do research, or was it like, I'm going to make
Oh,
this
well, I mean,
work?
it's the food I grew up eating, and I love New Mexico. I always have. And, you know, let's face it, Colorado and this area doesn't have a lot of like culture, so to speak. Like we're
Yeah,
not,
you're right. You're right.
we're
Yeah.
not New Orleans where there's this story of, the
Yeah.
Native
Yeah.
Americans and then the slave trade and all these things created this mashup of cuisines. We're out here in the plain. Well, the plains meet the mountains, and we're mostly white people here. So what's the story? And that's what Blackbelly was all about. It's like celebrating the ingredients that are grown here. But I grew up in New Mexico, and I feel like there really is a culture around the food there. And I wanted to bring that here. There aren't a lot of restaurants here that specifically focus on that. There's a lot of great Mexican restaurants. But in New Mexico, you learn from a very young age that the green chili is king, that everything needs green chili on it. It's not green chili, it's red chili. And so, red or green is the state motto. And we have a lot of very unique dishes in New Mexico that are familiar, but they're a little bit different. It's our own sort of spin on certain dishes like pozole or bizcochitos or sopapillas, you name it. But I really missed the food, and I also remember a restaurant. I remember when it was Masa Grill, and then Rada was there for many years. It was Italian, and it was such a fun restaurant. And it was one of those places that I used to go after work because I actually lived near there, but I remember the vibe was so great when Rada was really just banging, and they were super full, a lot of industry people, really good pizza. And the landlord, Steve, had reached out to me. We had talked about another space a couple of years before, nothing really, materialized. And when that place, a couple people had, kind of turned over a few times and wasn't doing well. And the landlord reached out. He's like, "Hey, I got the space. It's the current tenant hasn't paid rent in a few months. He owes me a bunch of money. So I'm sort of like, holding the space and going to keep everything in it. And if you want to take it over, just start paying rent, it's yours, And so I jumped at that because I feel like it's in a really good location. It does have parking. You've got great views of the Flatirons. And so I knew the space was good. And then I had to figure out what to put in there. And I had been talking just so much about New Mexico at that time. I proposed to my wife down in Taos, and we
Oh,
still,
wow. That's
yeah, we
great.
take our
That's
daughter
great.
down there all the time. And, I miss it. And I miss the green chili in particular. And so I wanted to open up a restaurant that sort of celebrates that food, but also with the Boulder aesthetic, that we're going to do a little bit more farm to table, a little fresh, and, make sure we're mixing in all these cool, really, really amazing dishes, but also have some seasonality to it and make sure that it's, healthy enough for the Boulder lifestyle, because some of the food down there can be pretty cheesy,
Yeah.
pretty
Oh,
filling.
yeah.
Uh, just trying to, strike that balance and, bring a little heat. I just wanted delicious,
Yeah.
spicy
Yeah.
food that made me feel like I was home.
Mission accomplished. How did it feel to receive the Green Star distinction? And was that do you consider that a milestone? Like,
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
yeah.
not everybody gets the opportunity to even have Michelin look at them, right? We didn't have
Yeah.
Michelin in Colorado until a few years ago. And what's funny is that we knew they were around, and I would love nothing more than for this restaurant to get a Michelin star, like a red star. But at the time, and I still feel this way, I feel like we're close, but we have some more polishing to do, so to speak, because we're also, we're kind of a neighborhood restaurant. We're high end enough to charge decent prices for our steaks, but we're not like, I wouldn't call us fine dining. And you often think of Michelin starred restaurants as fine dining restaurants. Anyhow, we knew they were swirling around, but we didn't really, I wasn't expecting anything, to be honest with you. I try to keep my expectations reasonable. That way, if something does happen, I'll be pleasantly surprised. I don't want to expect something and then not get it. So they had reached out to us to ask some questions. So we knew we were being considered for something. And then they reached out and asked if we would want to serve some appetizers at the award ceremony. And I was like, yeah, that'd be great. And so in my mind, and maybe I was just being, self-defeating or what, I figured, okay, they're not going to give us anything, but they're going to allow us to be there and cook for everybody. And that'll be our spot. We'll be there amongst the great winners, and we'll just be able to, be in the conversation. And so we showed up and we made some really beautiful little bites. We had caviar and Wagyu tartare and a couple things like that. And we were setting up at this little table that was pretty close to the stage. And, everybody started showing up, and, people are really dressed up and excited for this moment. And when they started the awards, they started with these individual awards. And the very first one they gave out was to Kelly, our butcher. And she was there with us, and she was flabbergasted, and so was I. So she won the Young Culinary Professional Award.
Yeah.
And then they did the Green Stars right after that. And then I got to go up and get the Green Star. And then they named both Blackbelly and Santo as recommended restaurants. So we got the plaques as well. And it was wild. It was really, really cool. I had a number of our staff with me there, so we were all celebrating, and we were just over the moon. And it was also beautiful because some very close friends of mine who met here at the restaurant, they're now married, and now they have their own restaurant in Denver called Glow. It's like a ramen shop. And they were there too, and they won the Bib Gourmand. And so we all were just like, oh my God, this is so cool, and it was just a really, really wonderful moment. It's definitely a milestone. It's definitely a thing for us to be very, very proud of, because to be honest with you, if there's anything we deserve, it's Green Star. We have gone out of our way to make sure we're sustainable, that we really walk the talk. And something we talk about all the time to people is that, we could buy pre-cut steaks, we could buy all these vegetables ready to go right off the Shamrock truck, and we would probably make a lot more money if we did it that way. But we want to be proud of what we're doing. We want our work to matter and to resonate, and to be a, example for other restaurants that you can do it the right way and still be successful. And that's been our story the whole time. And it works.
It does work. It does work. And continue. Congratulations. Amazing. I've chatted with Kelly a couple of times at the market. Amazing, by the way. I had chills the entire time you're telling the story. On a personal note, Chef, if I could, I want to thank you, on behalf of, not just Escoffier, but my wife as well, for the transparency and the advocacy that you've shown around your daughter, Sophie. This is where I get emotional, right? The nonprofit that you started, Sophie's Neighborhood, has raised so much awareness and funding for research. And I read that you once said, my proudest accomplishment is being a father. So regardless of everything that we've talked about, and I agree with you, I have 4 kids, and it is the proudest moment. Nothing else, comes close. How has fatherhood, Chef, and your work with Sophie's Neighborhood sort of shaped the way you lead, both inside and outside of the kitchen?
Well, that's a lot to answer. I'll try my best.
Yeah.
Well, I think if you ask some of my staff, people that have been with me for a long time, it's made me nicer and more patient. When I was a younger chef, I was pretty hardcore, and everything had to be perfect, and I was definitely mean to people, and I can occasionally blow my lid, but as many chefs can. But I think it's given me a new perspective on life and what really truly matters, at least for me. And somebody cut something wrong or overcooked a steak, it didn't ruin my life, and it didn't ruin my daughter's life. The show will go on. We just need to learn from these lessons. But I always wanted a family. I got a late start on that. I worked a lot, and I think things sort of happen sometimes the way they need to happen. So I didn't meet my wife till I was in my early 40s, and we got married. And then before we got married, I proposed to her. Then a few weeks later, we found out she was pregnant already. So it was, a bit of a shotgun wedding, if you will. Everything sort of got, went into rapid speed. And then we also opened Santo the same year that we got married and had Sophie. So that was a very full year. And, everything was great. We had 2 restaurants, we were starting our family, and we got married, we bought our first house. And then things got really tough. The same month that COVID struck the world, but in particular when Colorado announced that all restaurants had to shut down for indoor dining, was the same month that we got Sophie's diagnosis. And she was around 2 at the time, and she wasn't walking, and we were trying to figure out what was going on. And every test we had up to that point had shown normal results. We'd done genetic testing before she was born. Everything seemed fine. But we knew something was wrong. And so we did this more elaborate test. It's called whole genome sequencing or whole exome sequencing. And that's when they discovered that there was one little error in her genetic code. It's a mutation, and it's just one letter. And, you've got these genes, and they're all spiraled up in the DNA. And it's ironically, the doctor that told us what the analysis was, she described it as a recipe. If the human body is a recipe, you've got all these different ingredients and all these techniques, and this was just one ingredient that was wrong. Instead of salt, it was sugar. And it's one out of tens or even hundreds of thousands of genes in your body, and just one protein is off, and it can cause myriad problems. So she's got what's called MCTO. It stands for multicentric carpotarsal osteolysis. And it's in the specific gene that controls a number of functions in the body. And so her kidneys are affected. Her kidneys don't work exactly right. But luckily there's a lot of good information about kidney diseases out there. And she's on a kidney medication that seems to be holding them pretty normal. It's proteinuria, where I don't need to get into all the details, but basically her kidneys seem to be working fairly well. They are affected, but they're sort of holding steady. The other part of this disease, or one of the other parts of this disease, the most damaging is what happens with the bones. And so your bones, your body, every cell in your body is constantly like regenerating. Your old cells die off and new cells grow, just like people that have hair, it grows and
same.
Cut it off, it grows back, right? So with your bones, there's a constant resorption happening. So the bones are, basically sloughing off, and then new bone cells grow. Well, her body is breaking down the bones faster than they will grow. And it starts with the small joint bones for whatever reason. We still don't understand that completely, but in your wrists, you have the carpal bones, and your ankles, you have the tarsal bones. And the bones are deteriorating in her hands and legs, and it can affect all the joints in your body. And so if you take an x-ray now of her wrists, there's really no little bones left in her wrists. It's just the finger bones right to the arm bones, and her hands are very small. All the long bones in her hands too are sort of disintegrating. It's almost like if you had a sugar candy and you were sucking on it, and it was getting smaller and smaller. Mm-hmm. And so what we were told when she was 2, when we discovered what it is that this is a progressive, crippling disease that won't stop. It will get worse over time, and there's no known cure, and there's really nothing you can do about it. That's what we were told. So we said, no way, we're going to fight this, and we're going to figure something out. And it was incredibly scary, because at the time we didn't even know if our restaurants were going to make it, and we didn't know how we were going to make money anymore. And then we had this kid that was sick with this awful diagnosis. And at the time there was only about 20 known cases in the world. Oh, there's no real research. I mean, some research done, but not very much. All that they knew is that they can't stop it. And so we, fortunately, in Boulder, there are a lot of biotech startups, a lot of very, very smart scientists in this town. And we went out to dinner that night because everything was about to close. And we went to, at the time, one of our favorite restaurants, Arcana, and just wanted to have a family dinner and try to just savor the moment and then figure out what we were going to do. And when we were at dinner, we sat across a table from Dr. Larry Gold, who I know from he was an investor in Dave's Restaurants. And I just know that he's a very famous scientist and something to do with genetics. And he was sitting with another friend of mine for dinner. We didn't want to interrupt them at dinner, but I reached out the next day and I was like, hey, can you put me in touch with Larry? I think he might be able to help us. And he had Lauren and I in his office the very next day, and he looked at a report and he said, I'm gonna give you the help you need and deserve. And it really was just talk about a moment in time that I'll never forget, because we felt so hopeless. And when he told us, we're gonna figure something out, it was just amazing. So, the process has been slow. Medical research is extremely difficult. It's time consuming, it's expensive, and it takes just a ton of work to do these things. And a lot, you think about something like cancer, for decades, people have been pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into cancer research, and we still don't have a cure for cancer. And we've got this little girl and a couple dozen other people across the globe that have this awful, crippling disease. Like, what hope do we really have? But that doesn't stop us, so we're learning so much to try to wrap this story up. Like, since then, we have started our foundation. It's called Sophie's Neighborhood, and it's a 501c3 nonprofit. And we have raised a lot of money doing events with famous chefs, famous people, local celebrities, just good people all over. And we do everything from little cookie bake sales to these elaborate celebrity chef dinners. And we just raise as much money as we can, and every single penny goes into medical research. We've got a number of research grants that we've given to scientists all over the world. We've got people in Japan, in England, in Harvard, Australia, and a lot of local scientists that are doing different things. Cell lines, they have mouse colonies, they have these really, really high tech, things happening in these laboratories, and they're just trying to understand all of the functions, all of the genetics, and the cause and effect of all these different systems. The human body is very complex, and there's a lot of systems. A lot of these systems are intertwined. And so sometimes you can figure out a pathway to solve something, but then you create a different problem. There are certain medications that she could take that would hurt other parts of her body. So we have to be very careful what we do. All to say, we've made a lot of strides. We've learned a lot. We don't have a cure yet, but she is on 2 different medications that seem to be slowing the disease down. One of the things she does is an infusion. It's this bisphosphonate that she does it used to be every 6 months. Now she's having to go to every 6 weeks. But she gets infusions. She takes 2 medicines twice a day. She wears splints on her legs and her arms. She sleeps in night splints, and then she wears bracing on her feet. She always has braces on when she walks, but it helps her stay upright. She's got a ton of friends. She swims. She's in acting camp this week. In many ways, she's just like a totally normal little girl. She just had her 8th birthday. She's got a crew of very, very wonderful friends that are very supportive of her. They know that she's different. They know what she has, and they help her. They help her carry stuff, or they'll open doors for her. And because she's not as mobile as most kids. She has a very slow gait. She can't ride a bike. She can't run very well. She can't, stairs. She needs a handrail to get up and down stairs. So, you see little kids her age just riding their bikes off cliffs and, jumping off trees, and she can't do those things, but she can do a lot of other things. And she loves to play music, and she's very silly. And, I'm a glass half full kind of guy, and I just know that we're making progress. And I spend every moment I can with her trying to just make her happy. So that's what's going on with Sophie.
I can see the joy in your face when you speak about Sophie. I just want to thank you, for your transparency and your just genuine honesty. I think Sophie's very, very fortunate because her daddy's a problem solver.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And so is her mom.
So is her mom. So is mom. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know where the time goes, but I can't let you go. I 2 more questions if you have another minute.
Of course. Yeah.
Before Matt starts cutting the paper.
We need to set this room up. Apparently we have a group of 30 coming in here soon.
There you go. Yeah. The first question is, what dreams are still simmering? What's next? I know you hinted about it a little bit. You don't have to, I don't want to upset, Mama Bear. So, What's the next milestone professionally?
Well, so something I learned years ago when I was working for Kevin Taylor was, you know, you get a good reputation, you have a good restaurant, Michelin, whatever, and you attract talent, but there's only so much room in this restaurant for people to grow. And if we want to maintain talent, if I want to maintain these wonderful people that have helped me build this company and give them raises and give them new opportunities, we have to grow and we have to do this slow and steady. I'm not trying to open 50 restaurants, but I want to make sure that we slowly grow so that these people have growth opportunities with me and they stick around and help me do what I want to do. And so part of that has been growing Blackbelly. We've just gotten bigger over the years, and now we have another Santo opening up at DIA, and we opened up Blackbelly in Denver, and now we've got another project. It's actually going to be in your neck of the woods by the school there.
Oh, no way.
That's all I'm going to give you for now.
Oh, I know.
You need to
The
control the narrative.
chills. The chills.
Is the word there, but
Oh my gosh.
we're going to do a totally different type of cuisine, something that we haven't done yet, something that's very familiar with people, and it's something that I love to eat all the time.
Oh my gosh.
And I'll give you more later, but I do need to make sure I do this right. And
You got to be careful. Yeah.
control the narrative.
I love it. I love it.
But we're going to open up another restaurant, and then what my dream is, and I'm halfway there. For so many years as a chef, I worked all night, every weekend, all the holidays, minimum 5 days a week, but sometimes 7. And once I got married and had a kid, I realized I need to spend some time at home too, or that marriage probably won't last too long. So, and for me, I just want to be around my kid, so what I've been able to do getting bigger like this and having really good people working for me is that I can sort of step away. And so I'm not really cooking on the line anymore. I am cooking for a farm dinner tomorrow, and I do some events here and there, but I've got a whole crew of young cooks on the line that can handle this. I'm too old. So I go home and eat dinner with my family most nights. And
I love it.
I love it. Banker's hours now. I show up. I usually get here pretty early in the morning, and I bounce around between my restaurants and I check in with everybody. I have a lot of meetings, taste a lot of food, check in, fix things, buy things, just keep the business going. My goal is to be able to let all of these wonderful people that have helped me build this company run it and slowly take over. And I can just kind of step back and, be an advisor, be a mentor, and make sure everybody has what they need and they're taken care of, but not have to be in the throes of it. And that's, I like I say, I'm about halfway there. If I take too much time away from the restaurants, things start to get a little haywire. So I have to jump back in and fix a few things. So I still feel like my presence is needed and necessary, but we're getting there. And my goal in the next few years is to just be spending more and more time with Sophie and just making sure that the restaurants are covered.
That's the right answer. I love that you said growing the business. It's not a bad word, right?
Right. Right.
You have a lot of families that depend on your growing business.
Yep.
I have to honestly say, I'm older than you, and I'm going through the same metamorphosis as well. I used to always think that I had to be here to welcome the truck that delivered the food in the morning and make sure that the purchasing department had what they need, to make sure that the chefs had what they need. I recently brought on a wonderful person by the name of Adam to run the operations, and now I spend most of my time on innovation and AI and how can we help our teachers be even better as they engage with students, and then go to work for Hosea. Hey, one more question, and then I'll let you go, and Matt can get after it. The name of the show is The Ultimate Dish. So in your mind, I think I know where you're going to go, but what is the ultimate dish?
Oh, I'd say the most joy I get is cooking with my daughter. We do a few things together. She likes to make pasta with me. We created this hot dog ravioli. That's our little secret recipe now. We make ravioli, but we just put rings of hot dogs in there and then make a cheese sauce. But I'd say the thing I love to cook the most is just outside over the grill, whatever's in, go to the farmer's market and then make some pizza dough and make a pizza and have some grilled vegetables. And I love nothing more than being outside and cooking outside over fire and just, having a glass of wine in my hand while I'm doing it and hanging out with my family. I don't need much else beyond that.
That's such a solid chef entrepreneur answer. You checked all the boxes: family, outside, cooking, wine. I love it. I love it. Chef, thanks for taking some time with us. Very emotional, very inspirational. This is going to go out to thousands of people, and continue to inspire them to try to achieve even a portion of what you have in your career. But I can't wait to hear more. You're welcome to the school anytime. And the next time I have your contact information. The next time that we pop in, I'll make sure you know.
Yeah, let me know. And I love having the students here. We've had big groups come through for, tours and, let them see what we do. And I love going to the school and talking to the students as well. And we just love having them here because, we want to teach them young. We want to make sure that we give them the habits that we want them to have rather than coming in with habits that may not mesh with what we've got going, but it's great having a culinary school in town. And I encourage people to support that. And just thank you for talking to me and letting me be on your show.
Just great. So awesome. Thanks so much, Chef.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Ultimate Dish Podcast, brought to you by Auguste Escoffier School of Culinary Arts. Visit escoffier.edu/podcast to find any materials mentioned during the podcast, including notes, links, and other resources. And if you can, please leave us a rating on Apple or Spotify and subscribe to support our show. This helps us reach more aspiring individuals ready to take the next step toward their dream careers. Thanks for listening.